RDO releases tomorrow, so let's have some fun. Welcome back to the Budget Archive. My name is Mitch. Today's deck is a little bit different to normal. Normally I take a competitive list and I change it into a budget version so that I can show you what the cheapest way to build that deck would be. However, for this one, this is a complete new deck from scratch that I've built. It's not going to be the most competitive deck possible, but I feel with RDO coming out tomorrow, or if you're watching this in the future, having previously just come out, then there's a few cards that have come out with it that enable this deck to actually be good and be able to not win a sense, but be able to actually compete at your locals. Starting off, we've got Spirit of Purity. Now, I was going to run Lost Spirit just because it's Lost Spirit. It's a blank Norman Spirit that gives you nothing. However, it's $6. It comes in the starter deck, as you'll see on the third shelf down behind me. Those decks have it in it, but yeah, I don't really feel like opening that just to play a Lost Spirit. So this has the lineage release effect also of each player banishes 2 cards from their graveyard. This is great if you go first because you're able to then turn 2, level up into Tenoris, and then when your opponent goes to do something like a Crab Shock on your end step, in order to use a floating memory to level up themselves, you can just immediately banish this, get rid of the cards that your opponent put into your graveyard, gaining some advantage, and you're not really ever going to de-level in a deck like this, so it's not going to matter that your Spirit's now gone. Tenoris Lone Mercenary. On enter, gains Taunt until the beginning of your next turn. Now, because this is mainly an ally deck, a lot of the time you're going to want to be able to maybe not go into this turn 2. It really depends on the matchup, but a lot of the time you want to get some allies down on the board, then level up into this, so that you can then expand your board even more and be able to consistently deal damage to your opponent without having to worry about your allies getting removed that turn. Tenoris Might of Humanity has, on enter, Tenoris' next attack gets +3. A lot of the time this is going to be like late in the game, you've got the Bulwark Sword out still, which is this one here, and then you've got something like a Heavy Swing, enabling you to just be able to deal, what's that, 6, 7, 8, 9, dealing with 12 damage in one hit, which is pretty insane, especially in the ally deck that's been chipping away at their life over the whole game. So this can be your closing thing. Generally, you're not going to have a huge amount of influence in this deck, so paying the 2 cost level up in Tenoris is going to be a bit hard. You generally want to make sure that you are going to win off doing this. Otherwise, it's just in here as a bit of extra life to enable you to just survive through a few more decks than you normally would be able to. If you are looking to add a few things like a Grand Crusader's Ring or something to this deck, this is probably one of those cards you could possibly take out, but it is a good thing to enable closing out games. Alliance Gear Shield. This is another flex spotting deck. I like this card. I don't know if it's ever actually been played in a competitive format, but it's a fun card. 0 cost, ally link. Linked ally gets +1 health, and class bonus being Guardian, which we are. That ally also gets +2 attack when they're retaliating. So in this deck, we'll see things like Lurking Assailant, which has level 1+. Lurking Assailant may retaliate against attackers while not defending. And then there is also the new one, which is Shade Striker, which is very similar, just a 2/3 normal ally, which has Ambush, which is the exact same thing. Lurking Assailant came out before Ambush was a keyword, so that is why it is now a keyword on this. So effectively, being able to have these on the field, bring this out, put it onto it, it becomes a 4 defeat against ally, which is always good anyway. And then when it starts retaliating, you're going to be looking at 4 damage on retaliation. And they don't have to attack it directly, so it's going to be 4 damage retaliating to anything. You aren't always going to want to be leaving these allies up. Shade Striker is probably one of the few ones you probably don't really want to leave up. However, because Lurking Assailant, where are we looking? Here we are. Has Stealth while it's awake, then you're going to be quite often very hard to remove it. Your opponent's going to have to attack into something else, enabling you to retaliate before they can then attack this directly. Bulwark Sword, probably the best Guardian weapon there is for a Norm deck. Gets +1 from class bonus, of course we are. So it becomes a 3 attack with 2 durability. And as additional cost to attack with it, you have to pay 2. But paying 2 for 3 damage is generally a pretty good trade-off. And Flaming Orb, a lot of time in this deck, you're going to end up in situations where your opponent's holding up Veiling Breezes or just some prevention of some kind that's going to cause problems. So Fleeting Maw is just a good thing to be able to bring out and force your opponent to put cards in memory and just possibly let you go for that kill. Nullifying Lantern. There's quite a bit of water and fire decks running around at the moment, so this is generally one of those good cards to have in the deck, especially if your opponent's not expecting you to be running it. Bringing it out game 1 can often win you a game against some of those decks. Poison Coating Oil. Again, a little bit of a flex on this deck. It's better in the wind version, which means you can put this onto a stealth unit, then attack with it, wake it up again, attack with it again. However, just in this deck, it's a 0 cost Regalia that gives you +2 with your stealth units, so it's generally going to be the likes of Lurking Assailant, and just enabling a couple extra damage to get through to your opponent before they have anything they can do. It also works with Proto-Archive Scout, which I kind of laughed when I first saw this card because it is just Lurking Assailant without the retaliation side of it. It gets +1 from Proto-Key Crest. We're not going to be playing that in this deck, so it's just a 2/3 that has stealth when it's awake, so it's a good 2-in-1 play. Safeguard Amulet, of course, prevention for non-combat damage. Terraforming, prevention for combat damage, or slows them down from dealing combat damage, so it's a good thing to have in the deck always. And then we've got our 2 baubles, Wind Resistance Bauble and Fire Resistance Bauble. These baubles are definitely flex spots in most ally lists. However, if you were looking to probably turn this a little bit more competitive, you probably look at dropping the Gear Shield, possibly dropping the Poison Coating Oil, and putting in a Grand Crusader's Ring, and then bringing the Water Resistance Bauble from side over here into the main board. Then got Allied War Priestess. I was looking for good generic allies to put into an ally list, and because we're Guardian class bonus, we get the +1 damage on this. As long as you've leveled up into Tenoris already, this is going to be a 2/3, which is your standard stat line on most allies. However, it also has the memory 4+ on attack, recover 2. So if you have this and a couple other allies out, a good play would be to have Bork Sword out already, attack with that paying the 2, and then playing Inspiring Cooldown here for 1, then drawing a card into your memory, which will effectively put 4 cards into your memory total, and giving +1 to all your other allies. So once you attack with this, you're not only going to be dealing 3 damage with this, you're also going to be recovering 2, which in a norm deck like this, where you haven't got any other way to recover really, it is pretty powerful being able to consistently recover every turn, forcing your opponent to have to do extra damage due to kill you. Now spell. Of course, 3 costs, level 2+, costing 1 less. We're generally not going to get that effect unless you go into level 2, but there's not many situations you can be in level 2 while continuing on the game. It has negate target spell activation unless its controller pays 3. So, as with most decks that aren't water, interaction is pretty important, and quite often if you do not have any interaction at all to stop them from killing you, you are going to die. So of course we haven't got access to like Veiling Breeze or Innovative Agility or anything like that that you would have in the wind allies, and you haven't got any of the counters you would have in water allies normal. So an spell is just a good thing to have in this deck, enabling you to stop your opponent from killing you or stop your opponent from wiping your board with some type of spell. It is one of those cards that if you feel like you don't have enough allies, you could probably drop it. However, I just felt like it was a good inclusion in this deck. Blade of Rifts here. Probably my favourite norm card to come out in the last couple sets. 3-drop 2/3 that has True Sight at level 1+. Quite often we're going to be going level 1+, so this is a good thing to be able to bring in. It's also something that I've been messing around with a competitive ally list that I might release at some point. However, we'll see how far I go with that list. It's doing well, but it's still a little bit missing from it, so I haven't really looked at upgrading with RDO cards yet, so we'll see what we do there. But this was an immediate conclusion, because being a 3-drop 2/3 with True Sight, you're already better than Trained Hawk in terms of you've got that extra damage required to kill it. So Trained Hawk often being a 2/2 gets killed immediately. Doesn't have the bigger side of it, but that's not the worst trade-off. And if you bring out a Wind Trotter and put a buff counter onto this, it's going to become a 3/4 with True Sight, which is immediately dealing with your Cheshire Cats and any other ally that's pretty much dealing damage to you and doing problems for you that has stealth. Quite often, of course, we don't have the Wind Trotter in this deck, so you're going to be wanting to use this alongside Inspiring Call most of the time, just to give it that little bit of extra damage in order to kill it. Then got Conceal, 2-drop, allies you control gain stealth until end of turn, fast speed. This doesn't get really played a lot. I don't really know why. It's a good card. It just hasn't got the versatility that a lot of the other ally prevention has. And of course, your champion still has, well, sorry, still doesn't have stealth. So you're still able to attack your champion directly, which doesn't really affect a lot of decks. However, if you are running into situations where your opponent's quite often removing your allies, then Conceal is probably a good thing to be able to just play out, let your ally survive another turn, and then be able to deal a lot more damage in the coming turns. Now, Dawn of Ashes. This is probably the one card, or sorry, the one reason you are playing All Norm. If you can get this in your starting hand, play it immediately, because your opponent is going to hate you. Unique Domain that has upkeep at the beginning of your recollection phase. Reveal a card at random from your memory. If that card is not Norm element, sacrifice it. We're playing All Norm. You're never going to have that. Yes, you're going to be giving information to your opponent of the cards in your hand quite often. However, it's a good trade-off, seeing as non-Norm element cards cost 1 more to activate. Because we're running Norm, this isn't going to affect us at all. However, your opponents, they're not going to have a great time, seeing as majority of your decks run very minimal Norm cards. And if they are running a higher counter Norm cards, like something like Luxem's Andor that's running Serene Spirit, then they're not going to be affected as much. However, if they go to try activate any of their Luxem cards and the likes, it's always going to cost them 1 more, so they have to spend a lot longer trying to get their influence up in order to go for that kill. Reflecting Edge, another good prevention card. Of course, it's a warrior sword reaction. However, because it is, if you control a sword, it's 1 less. It isn't class bonus locked. Balk Sword is actually a sword, so we're going to be able to get this when we've got Balk Sword out. And it's going to be a free cast, effectively, of prevent the next 3 attack damage we dealt to target unit this turn. Often this is a good way to protect your allies, but then also protect yourself from something like a Rending Flames. Gildas. Anybody knows me knows Gildas is probably one of my favourite cards in the game, if not my favourite card in the game. I have played this since DOA came out, pretty much. I started on Fire Lorraine for the first ever regionals. Came 4th in the regionals, I believe. 4th, 3rd? 4th, might have been. And I wasn't running Gildas at that point, but then as soon as the St. Auckland came around, I jumped onto Winter Allies, and Gildas was just a powerhouse at that point. Absolutely insane. Top 32 with that. Won't go into depth. You can see the playmat behind me up on the wall. Yeah, I should have been top 8 in that competition, but I learned a very valuable lesson about not rolling the dice. Yeah, not much to say about Gildas. It's 3-drop, 1/3, has balance of getting +3, so effectively, because a lot of the allies in this deck are 3-drops, quite often you're going to be playing this down on a turn, attacking for 4, and then consistently, as long as your opponent doesn't remove it, you're able to play another ally each turn and keep attacking for 4 every turn. Heavy Swing. 6 cost, 6 attack. I mean, 1 cost for 1 attack is always good. So it also has a class bonus of costing 2 less. Quite often you're going to be doing this after you've gone into Tenoris, like next turn after you go into him, or a couple turns later, just whenever you don't need that taunt ability to be active. And being a 4 cost 6 damage is pretty insane, but if you go alongside Bullock Sword and pay the 2, it effectively becomes a 6 cost for 9 attack, which quite often when you've been doing chip damage to your opponent can close out a game. I have jumped between Lorraine and Tenoris on allies for quite a while. I have done well on both of them, especially in regional events. I do prefer Tenoris in terms of the way it plays and being able to actually interact with your opponent a lot more and protect your allies. However, Lorraine with Hurricane Sweep is just insane, so when you're running Norm, I definitely think Tenoris is better, but if you're running Win, Lorraine is probably the way to go. Imperial Recruit, 2-drop, 1/3. As long as it's fostered, it gets +1, and just has foster at the beginning of your recollection phase. If it hasn't taken damage since the end of your previous turn, it becomes fostered. It's a 2-drop ally. This is probably one of those cards you could probably cut if you wanted to add something different to the deck, just because it is a 1/3 most of the time. However, being a 2 cost, you do run into situations where you've got 3 cards left in your hand and you only need to do 1 more damage, so it's a good thing to be able to play in that situation. It's also good turn 1 play if you know your opponent's not going to be playing any allies out and they're going to just be trying to build up their influence and play their game plan. Then being able to play this on turn 1, get it fostered straight away, have a 2/3 on the board for only 2, having been able to play out something like a Lurking Assailant alongside of it, then you're going to be in a decent situation with 2 allies already on board, dealing 4 damage on your following turn. Inspiring Call, we've already talked about this. It's a great card to have, especially when you've got the Bulwark Sword out, having been able to attack and effectively pay 3 to deal 3 damage to them, and then also get a card into your memory, being able to buff up your other allies on the board at the same time. Lurking Assailant, having already talked about as well. Great card, perfect turn 1 play to be able to play out because your opponent's very rarely going to be able to remove it. Overpowering Defense. This is a card you probably don't see very often, and one of the reasons I actually really like Taurus at the moment as a ally deck. Activate this card only if a Guardian unit you control is attacking. Negate all card activations you don't control. A lot of decks, especially decks with Prevention, will be running like Resolute Stands and such, and will wait for you to attack and commit that attack before they go to try play the Prevention. So we look through this deck. Got Allied War Priestess. Flavor Set isn't Guardian. Neither is that. Hero Recruit is Guardian. It's another reason why we run this in the deck. Isn't. Is. Brilliant Protector and Vigil Rampant are both. So we aren't running a huge amount of Guardian units. But the main thing for this is Taurus. Because quite often you're going to be going for something like, well, you've got the 8 cards in hand, and you're able to play the heavy swing, going for 6 damage, and then being able to stop your opponent from doing whatever they're doing to prevent the damage by playing this after the attack's already going through. It's just a good piece of interaction in order to stop your opponent from effectively stopping you from killing them. Proto Archive Scout, as we discussed, Lurking Assailant, pretty much copy for copy. Doesn't have Retaliate, but gets +1 from the Proto Crest. Proto Crest isn't in this deck because it does very little for this deck. However, it's just a good turn 1 play to have. Shade Striker, Ambush, 2/3, 3 cost. Pretty much any ally that's a 2/3 that has a keyword on it is decent. It's definitely one that will probably go into some lists that I run in the future for competitive side of things. However, it's still a little bit worse than Lurking Assailant because Lurking Assailant has the stealth as well. So it just depends on what you want in the deck. Zhang, Fierce Princess. I'm not going to try to say her full name properly. I will mess that up massively. 3 cost, 2/3 of Imbue 3. Of course, with all cards in this deck being norm, we're going to be able to imbue this all the time. If damage will be dealt to Shang from a non-norm element source while Shang is imbued, prevent 2 of that damage. So, as we've discussed, a lot of decks don't run a huge amount of norm units, so it's mostly going to be advanced element and then whatever main element they're playing for their allies. So, you're very rarely going to run in situations where they're easily able to remove this. And the main way I see to remove this at the moment is the Blade of Rift seal with buff counter or get Inspiring Call active on it. However, that very rarely happens. You do have to be mindful that Cheshire Cat will be able to remove this because it is a norm element. But that's very few and far between. You probably aren't going to be playing this out if that's the case. So this is a good thing to be able to get on the field early. Your opponent's not going to be able to remove and you can constantly chip away damage with it. It is fairly expensive, hence we're only running 3. I would be running 4 on this if our budget could allow it. Song of Nurturing, 2 costs, allies you control get +2 until end of turn. So a lot of the time you're going to be using this in situations where your opponent's trying to sweep your board with a cleave of some kind. Most cleaves in the game are going to be for 3, maybe 4 damage. If they do get up to that 5 damage, you're probably not going to be able to stop with a Song of Nurturing in this deck. However, it is definitely a card to have in here anyway, just to give you that possibility of stopping your opponent from wiping your board completely. Valiant Protector, this is a new RDO card. 3 drop 2/3, as we discussed, good stat line. That also has class bonus, Bulwark. So effectively it enters the field with a Bulwark counter on it, so if combat damage would be dealt to it, prevent that damage and remove the Bulwark counter instead. So this is another one of those allies that effectively it's going to take your opponent an extra attack in order to kill it. Yes, there are 1 attack allies that can just chip this, get rid of the Bulwark counter, and then go in for the kill again. But a lot of the time, that 1 damage is still impactful in the game, meaning you're not going to be taking that damage. That's going to give you a bit of a longer game in order to actually kill them. Vigil Rampart, another one from RDO. This is a 4 cost, 1/4. Not the best, however it has class bonus of +2. Because we're quite often going to be going to Taurus pretty early in the game, this is effectively going to be a 4 cost of 3/4. If you played around as Ace and Protectors a lot, that's a decent stat line. It doesn't have Intercept or anything, but in this deck we would try and do as much damage to your opponent as fast as possible, being able to attack for 3 every turn, and knowing you've got all this interaction to deck in order to stop your opponent. can often lead to situations where it's very hard for them to deal with this. Of course, Water Resonance Bauble. In the sideboard, we've also got Cardinal of Divine Right. Angel cards and objects can't become imbued. 3-drop, 2/3. I mean, as we discussed, it's another ally that's decent in the deck. I feel like at the moment, this almost could be mainboard, especially if you go into your locals in the first few weeks of RDO, because everybody's going to be playing Angels. They're all going to be playing the new Imbue Angels, trying to mess around with them, trying to build decks with them. And being able to just drop this on the field turn 1, turn 2, your opponent's just going to look at it and cry, because all those Angels no longer do anything, and a lot of them don't do anything without the Imbue effect. Disenchant, 2 cost, slow speed, destroy target for Fantasia. There's still going to be quite a bit of fractals running around, as well as a few other decks that rely on Fantasias. So this is one of those cards that not being in wind means we can't play Scatter Essence or anything like that. So this is a good alternative. You do have the 3 cost fast speed one. However, I find that this is probably the better option in a deck where you're trying to go low to the ground. Safeguard Paragon, 3 cost, 1/2. Sacrifice it. Prevent the next 4 non-combat damage we dealt to each unit you control's turn. Another one of the cards that's good to bring in against Spellslinger decks that are using like Purge and Flames and the likes in order to wipe your board. Just meaning that you can prevent your allies from dying by only losing this one ally. Scavenger Raccoon. Again, there's a lot of water allies running around at the moment, as well as fractals. And being able to get rid of their floating memory is always impactful. So being able to just play this out, banish 2 cards from the graveyard, and you being able to choose them can just often win you games on the spot. Also a 1/1 body, that's norm, so, you know, but extra damage is always good. Moving on to the price breakdown, we have the material deck coming in at $2.69, the main deck coming in at $52.16, and the sideboard coming in at $8.11. Now, these prices aren't 100% accurate, just because I've had to kind of estimate what the cards will be worth. So all the common uncommons from RDO, I've put at 10 cents each, because that's where I feel like they're probably going to settle based on the similar cards from other sets. However, they could be a little bit more, possibly even 7-8 cents for some of the worst ones. So take the prices with a bit of grain of salt. In Sideboard, of course, we've got Cardinal Divine Right. That's a rare within the set. I do think on release it's going to be a $5 to $10 card, just because everyone's going to be playing Angels, so everybody's going to want the thing that stops the Angels. However, I do feel it's going to settle probably around the $2 price mark eventually, so that's where I've put it for now. Of course, these do mean that we often are going to be above our standard price point for this deck, with our total price coming in at $62.96. It's a lot more than the $50 mark that I normally work around. However, I do feel that this is a bit more of a chilled out deck, a deck that you can build and take to locals, change things around to how you want to play. If you want to add some more allies to make it more aggressive, you can. You want to drop back the allies a little bit and maybe add some level 3 stuff in order to go level 3 Tony, you can. There's a lot you can do with this deck, a lot of things you can move around and change. There has been a Exalted Tony list that I was shared recently in a group chat that kind of looks a little bit fun. I might have to try it out. It effectively runs only norm cards with Dawn of Ashes. However, all your Exalted stuff is norm. So you can often get to level 3 with a Dawn of Ash on the field and end up in a situation where you're controlling the game state while playing some pretty powerful cards out onto the field. And you're never going to lose that Dawn Ashes either with that deck. So for that reason, I haven't done an upgrade path for this deck, just because I do find that with everything here, it's decent. Of course, there is stuff you can always improve. You can always add another Gildas, add another Shang, add a few more of the powerful norm allies. You could probably go Looking Glass with a Cheshire Cat combo in the deck, but it's not needed. It's one of those ones where it'd probably make the deck more powerful, more competitive, but then you get into the price point of it's no longer fun, you're just trying to build a competitive deck, which this definitely isn't the thing you want to build at the competitive level. So I just decided to let you build the deck, let you make your own changes, figure out what's good. Let me know in the comments down below what you end up doing, and I look forward to seeing whatever you come up with. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what else you want to see down below. Until next time, stay safe.